Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Chungmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro podcast. It is now Thursday, November 21st. It's about 5 p.m. And this week started off with a lot of big, important domestic news. Joon Ha, please take us away.
Yeah, so last Friday, the Seoul Central District Court, they convicted Lee Jae-myung on 2 counts of disseminating false information during his 2022 presidential campaign. Lee received a 1-year prison sentence, suspended for 2 years under election law violations.
So he's not actually going to face real jail time, at least under this particular conviction.
No. He's still got 2 trials left. So the second trial, the appeal trial, will happen sometime this year. And then the next final trial, which will decide whether he actually has to spend jail time or not, at the Supreme Court will be decided sometime next year.
Most likely in June or sometime in the middle of next year, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And these are all before the upcoming presidential election.
Yes, yeah. So it will happen in 2025. And the court, they ruled that Lee falsely claimed in a December 2021 TV interview that he did not know a government official involved in the controversial Daejangdong land project.
Can you explain just very quickly what the Daejangdong incident is?
Yeah, so the Daejangdong incident was something that Lee has denied involvement in, but the Daejangdong land project is something that was coerced by or he claims was coerced by the transport ministry, which involved favoritism of basically going forward with a land project in the city of Seongnam.
Right, so it's like redevelopment scheme sort of thing, right?
Yeah, a lot of money involved there as well. So he was accused of falsely claiming that, and under election law, if you falsely claim something with the objective of getting elected, then that you could serve 5 years in prison.
You know, I know that I talk about South Korean politics and the government and the laws in a disparaging light very often, but this is one of those times when I'm actually quite happy. I mean, can you imagine what would be happening in the United States right now if this kind of law was taking place with their election scandals and what they say during their campaigns?
When you say they, it sounds like a very specific person.
A very specific person who's got a very orange face, yes. But anyway, I'm saying that is a good thing for South Korea.
That there is a structure and system like that.
Indeed, yeah. I mean,
So what's the exact law about banning someone to run for presidency or something?
So it's the Public Official Election Act, and under Article 250, if my memory serves, then if a public official, as I mentioned, whether in office or not, suggests something else that, claims that a fact is wrong about himself with the objective of running for another term in public office and is found to have falsely claimed that, then he will be, or he or she will be barred from running in the next election.
Right, and isn't there something to do with like the minimum level of penalty that you have to get in order to be barred from running for...
I believe the minimum penalty is 1 million won, right?
Right,
that's
it's a
about,
fine, right?
That's about $730.
Which means that a year in prison and 2 years suspended is much above that, right?
Yes, yeah.
But because there was no fine, I believe that's what allows him to make that appeal, right?
So, he still has the grounds to appeal since, this is only the first trial. And it's not finalized until it gets to the Supreme Court. And the reason why that there is a second round is so that the defendant can also appeal for that. So it's still very much up in the air, but there is a strong likelihood that he will not be able to run in the next election.
Right, Joon Ha, you have been following this much closer than John or me. And what's the initial reaction from different factions in the Democratic Party right now?
Well, mostly the Democratic Party has agreed to rally beside Lee Jae-myung. Lee Jae-myung has publicly voiced, especially immediately after his first court hearing came out, that this is something that will be documented in South Korean history, South Korean modern history, and this is something that he and his party will also appeal.
Right, and he is framing this as much as he did in the past cases or controversies, and like Choguk is framing like his own case. It's like a political persecution.
Yeah, I mean,
is how he's framing
gone
it.
as far to label it as a prosecutorial dictatorship. You know, it's something that the opposition party leaders have been voicing, especially Lee Jae-myung and Cho-guk, for their personal scandals that they're involved in. So it's something that we still have to wait to see.
Now, framing themselves as martyrs, now this is something that we can just spend at least another hour just talking about that particular topic alone. But we're going to have to move on to the next topic now. Moving on to foreign policy just a little bit. In South Korea, there were a lot of China-related stories that came out this week. For instance, the biggest story that came out earlier this week was regarding a man named Chung Ha-young. Now, for those of you who might not remember who he is, he's not been active in politics since he left the Moon administration. But while he was in the Moon administration, he was the former national security advisor, and he was also later the foreign minister. Now, for those of you who might remember that name, you might remember that because Chung Ha-young was the national security advisor who actually announced at the White House in 2022, or was it 2018 rather, that Kim Jong-un was committed to denuclearization. Now,
and he was one of the main core counterparts when it comes to that summit tree all that year.
Right. Now, he's been in hot water now. Now, there's no convictions yet. It's all just investigations for now. But the South Korean government has said that he is under investigation, he and some other senior Moon administration officials, for having leaked sensitive information about the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile System, THAAD, to China and to anti-THAAD South Korean activists while he was serving as the national security advisor.
Like I saw that a lot of South Korean headlines started off their leads with civic groups. But I think the most important thing here is something about Chinese officials, right?
Right. The way they're framing in the South Korean media right now, it's about the civic groups because that's about domestic politics. There were a lot of people who were opposed to that THAAD deployment.
There still is.
There still are. Not as vociferous as they used to be, but yes, they're still there. But yes, China is the big thing because China apparently had all this information about what the U.S. was planning to do, where they were planning to deploy these THAAD batteries, and how many. And this kind of information was allegedly just leaked to Beijing.
So if this turns out to be true, what's the implication?
Well, I don't think this one will actually be anything that's similar to the final straw that breaks the camel's back or anything. What the Yoon administration is going to do is to take this and turn it into a domestic issue. That the Democrats, the Moon administration of people, were the ones who are weak on defense, that they're pro-China, that they're willing to sell out the country's national security. That's going to be the frame that the Yoon administration and the Conservative People Power Party are going to go with.
And it's on a silver platter, really.
It's a very easy thing to sell.
And how will, if this is true, how can the Democratic Party sort of turn the discourse around for their favor?
Very easily. They can just do about their whataboutism. All right, but what about you in Japan? What have you been doing with Japan?
What kind of information did you give Japan?
Why aren't you complaining about the Fukushima nuclear power plant? There's going to be a whole lot of what about this, what about that. It's, politics in a nutshell.
There were other China-related headlines, just this morning as well.
Once again, it's about industrial espionage. This is one of those stories that will never go away. Just like Deadpool says, we're going to be talking about this until we're 90.
I think we can easily just pre-write a bunch and just publish them.
Pretty much. Just like those missile tests that North Koreans do, just change a date and this is still the same story. But yeah, there is an ongoing investigation about a South Korean person who was working at a company that's been unnamed, but I think we're pretty much sure what that company is, but because the courts have not named it, I don't think it's appropriate for us to name it just yet. But this researcher had leaked 17 secret, highly classified technology documents to the Chinese companies.
What kind of technology, though?
This one was about displays, and because the court document said Company S, and they talk about displays.
Company S and display. Wow, what could it be?
Exactly. All right, let's just say it's most likely Samsung and it's most likely OLED screen technology. And so this technology was leaked to
This is
their
not my
Chinese
view or the
counterparts.
company's view.
This
It's
is
John
not
Lee's
my
personal
views.
view.
This is not the company's views. It's just my speculation. Let's just put it out there. So if you're a lawyer out there, just hold on to your horses for a little bit. Not saying it's a fact. Just yet, anyway. And so this is at least $150 or more million worth of technology that was leaked to these Chinese companies. So, and of course, there were also other stories about how another person had imported an American semiconductor technology into South Korea and falsified those documents so that they would not have to pay taxes or whatever, and then took that semiconductor and brought it over to China.
Okay. Bigger question here, just momentarily, is why do they keep leaking it to China specifically?
I'm guessing that they're not doing it for free. I'm pretty sure that those Chinese companies are not saying, hey, would you volunteer to do this for us? I don't think that's how that works. I'm pretty sure there's got to be some sort of financial incentive, or maybe job offers, or, there's always going to be some kind of carrot. And so these are the news stories that just broke out. And again, as we alluded earlier, this is not the first time that we're talking about tech espionage. This has been going on multiple times. But since we've already talked about industrial tech espionage so many times, I don't think we need to cover the same grounds again. So, Tungmin, take us away. You wrote a very insightful analysis yesterday.
It was one of these things where there's like a big data set coming out from the South Korean government, and it does not really point to exact causes of things, but there are hints in there. This was the employment rate statistics for married women, which confused me at first because it said 15 to 54. And I was like, why is it 15? And apparently it's probably because of age of consent. But moving on from that whole fiasco, married women employment rate did go up. It was record high, actually. The reason why I started reading about this is because a lot of media outlets initially pointed to Yoon Suk-yeol administration's low birth rate policies and childcare policies as a potential likely reason why the employment rate went up to record high level, which was 66%. But I think it requires a grain of salt when you are looking at this data. Like, for more detailed information, just read my story. That's just a lot of numbers. But the gist is, first of all, there might be just denominator issue, the demographic shift that might have contributed to the increasing percentage, because in the past year, there were the number of married women decreased by 290,000 due to the delayed marriages that we have talked about before and declining marriage rates overall. But the number of employed women with minor children, it actually rose. So maybe that might have sort of contributed to the percentage. But to be fair, the rate has been gradually increasing since the end of COVID-19. There could be multiple factors rather than just improved childcare, right? It already went down during COVID, so it was
also
going
guessing
up.
Cost of living might have something to do with it.
Yeah, cost of living and inflation, housing, education cost related to early childhood, like even like these days, people send their children to hagwons or schools or whatnot. Not after elementary school, but before, like under 6 as well. So there might have been economic pressures for younger mothers to return to work prematurely. Perhaps the potential sign that points to this potential factor is that the wage gap still continues. So the average wage gap continues between men and women. Second, for the women between 35 to 39, traditionally who have to sort of move on to management roles, they actually have a dip in their career. Also, 1 out of 5 mothers with children still experience the stopping, they
have to cease working once they actually have to go on parental leave.
Right, and the biggest number among those people who have to stop working, they only get back to work after 10 years. So that's still a very, very long time to stay out of work. But employment rate went up, but also the wage went pretty much down.
And that's a concerning thing, isn't it? Usually when someone steps out of the workforce for 10 years, they usually have a tough time getting back into the workforce. But your analysis suggested that even though they've been out of the workforce for that long, they still went back into the workforce, which just shows how desperate people are to find more work in order to get more money because, again, kids cost money.
Yeah. And also, there are other data, just lastly, that point to how women might be sacrificing their preferred career for economic needs or other issues. It could be personal choices about parenting. But the work hour actually went down for a lot of young mothers, which point to the possibility of either a good thing, which is flexibility at workplaces, but that sounds less likely when I look at South Korean companies. So it could be moving to part-time roles, sacrificing their full-time role at the companies, which usually give them the possibility to get promoted at in time.
So if you look at the overall numbers, yes, the numbers look positive, but if you just dig a little bit deeper, well, for all of those South Korean news outlets that were actually crediting Yoon's low birth rate policies and childcare policies for this increased numbers, perhaps we should remember that old adage, correlation does not equal causation.
So wait before you celebrate.
Introducing Korea Pro, your all-in-one South Korea intelligence solution. Start each day with our executive briefing on the most crucial issue and a snapshot of key Korean and international headlines. Gain deeper understanding through our original analysis on South Korea's economy, politics, security and society. Our Monday Week Ahead newsletter prepares you for upcoming business and political events, while the weekly podcast keeps you informed on recent developments. Get clear, actionable business intelligence every day. Visit koreapro.org/podcast and never be sidelined again.
All right, week ahead.
Yeah, so Lee Jae-myung will be facing his second trial for a separate issue related to perjury. He'll be standing in front of court on November 25th at around 2 p.m., where he will be hearing his second hearing result for a separate case.
Things are not looking good for that man.
No.
And while we cover that, John will be in Phuket.
I will be eating mangoes and durians every day for
And-
every meal.
And just lastly, the National Assembly continued to review the 2025 budget, which will be hopefully completed by the first week of December.
And if you want more of this information, it'll be sent to your email inboxes in the Week Ahead newsletter by Monday at 2 p.m. So please subscribe for more. And have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye, John.
Fly me to the moon. Yeah! Bye-bye!
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
And I'm John Lee. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.